By now, my love of the Triglavian ships should be pretty obvious for anyone who watches my content. Every one of these ships is awesome, but whilst I'm primarily a frigate, destroyer and cruiser pilot, a special place in my heart will always go out to the assault vessels. Now, I've already covered the Triglavian Collective Capacitor heavy assault cruiser on this channel, so today we're going to be taking a closer look at their Tech 2 assault frigate, the Nergal. This little beast of a ship is well named after the Sumerian god of death, as it's capable of disintegrating its prey with a truly terrifying amount of entropic damage, especially for a ship of this tonnage. In this video, I'll be talking about why I love the Nergal, how I fit it, and what kind of content I run with it. Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie and welcome back to another video for EVE Online. In today's video we're going to take a look at another one of the Triglavian collective vessels, this time around the Tech 2 assault frigate, the Nergal. This is a very requested video, a lot of people have been asking me to cover this one, so I'm not going to do this purely from a wormhole perspective, but I'm going to look at the ship and talk about what it can do in all kinds of different situations, though of course wormholing being my main remit and wheelhouse is what we'll be focusing on, perhaps. Now, I like to talk about the mythology and the naming conventions behind the Triglavian vessels, and whilst most of them are based in Slavic mythology, with the notable exclusion of the Capacitor being more Finnish, the Nergal is actually Mesopotamian, Sumerian, which is a really weird sort of segue and side stance into it. Nergal was the Mesopotamian god of destined death, basically, or assigned death is another term that often gets used around it, inflicted death. Basically, Nergal was the god of the underworld and would be the guy who would come looking for you when your time was up. It also meant that he was kind of considered to be a god of disease, but not necessarily in quite as negative a connotation as that would normally suggest. In fact, he's often portrayed as quite a light-hearted character and is often referred to as the god of peace, because he was a deterrent for war, because you don't want to invoke Nergal, because in war comes all this death and pestilence, and this guy is going to be heavily involved, and thus, therefore, maybe we should make peace instead. It's also probably the basis of the Warhammer 40,000 Chaos God of Nergal, and why Nergal in 40k is pretty much the happy-go-lucky grandfather Nergal who sees all of his death and decay as gifts. But hey, we are going out of the sci-fi franchise of EVE Online into the dark science fiction fantasy of Warhammer 40,000. Let's not do that, we'll save that for some 40k videos that maybe I'll make one day in the future. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to be unpacking the Nergal, talking about what this ship can do, what it can't do, how I fit it, and all the different types of content that I run it through. And hopefully by the end of this video you'll have a deep appreciation for what is one of my favourite frigates in the game. Anyway, with all that said and done, folks, if you do enjoy this video, please hit like, drop a comment down below as well. Both those things massively help the channel out, completely free for you, really helps boost my content and keep it supported. But if you do want to go the extra mile to help support me financially, absolutely you can do that. Drop into the description of this video. You can check out my Patreon page, my PayPal tip jar, and my Redbubble merchandise store. I am having some real difficulties with my personal laptop at the moment. I am asking if people are able to donate to help me sort out my computer. That would be awesome, so please either sign up for my Patreon or my PayPal tip jar. And yes, I am begging, I'm not below that. I'm in a real sticky situation at the moment. Any help would be deeply appreciated. Finally, if you are fairly new to EVE Online, although to be fair, if you're watching a video about a Tech 2 Triglavian assault frigate, I'm assuming you're a little bit further in. If you haven't used a referral link before, I've got one in the description down below as well. You can click. That will give me a little kickback and it'll give you 1 million free skill points to help boost you into whatever you want to fly. Maybe a Triglavian collective Nergal. Who knows? Anyway, all of that said and done then, let's jump right into talking about the Triglavian Collective's assault frigate, the Nergal. First of all then, let's take an actual look at the Nergal assault frigate's stats, traits and ship characteristics, because this defines what this vessel can do. It's a bit of an interesting one, there's some really nice stuff going on here. I will point out early on, this is an expensive hull. As far as assault frigates go, this is a lot more expensive than the 4 Empire variants. Obviously beyond that as well, being Triglavian does mean that you have to go and buy the skill books from the market. You can't just get them straight out of the skill training screen. They can also be fairly expensive. You're going to obviously need precursor frigate and small precursor weapon as well in order to make this work. Anyway, let's have a look at these trait bonuses. First of all, the roll bonuses. We have the typical Assault Frigate 50% reduction in Micro Warp Drive signature radius penalty. This is already off to a really nice start. It means if you're running a Micro Warp Drive, whereas normally fitting a Micro Warp Drive, when you activate it, you get something around about a 500% increase in both the speed of the vessel you're flying and the signature radius of the vessel itself. So you're going a lot faster, but you're also a bigger, easier to hit target. That means that Micro Warp Drives normally are not very useful for speed tanking. The bloom to your signature radius actually will outweigh the bonus of the speed increase. Basically, a Micro Warp Drive, very useful for getting from A to B quickly, but not the kind of thing you use for speed tanking. When you're running an Assault Frigate, on the other hand, yeah, that 50% reduction in Micro Warp Drive signature radius means, for example, if it was a 500% bloom, it's now only a 250% signature radius bloom, which means now the speed increase does outweigh the penalty of the signature radius bloom. So you can use it for speed tanking, and it does quite well doing so. We have the ability to fit assault damage controls, so let's talk about those briefly. Assault damage controls are special low slot modules that can only be fitted to assault frigates or heavy assault cruisers, two of my favourite classes of ship in the game. They are essentially like the standard damage control unit. They increase passively your hull damage resistance, armour damage resistance, and shield damage resistance, but not to the same extent as a standard damage control unit would. And you might be thinking, well, why would I fit one then if a damage control is better? Well, basically, these have an activatable mode as well that is going to increase your damage resistances by a ridiculous amount for almost 9 seconds, 8.78 seconds to be precise. It does have a reactivation delay of 150 seconds, but this essentially forms a panic button of, oh crap, I'm taking too much damage, slap the assault damage control and you're taking nothing for an extended period of time, up to 9 seconds of very low damage. Being a Triglavian vessel as well, we do get a couple of additional roll bonuses down here. 50% reduced energy neutralizer capacitor need is very nice in PvP and is brilliant for helping mute out other frigates that you may be going up against. A 50% reduced remote armor repairer capacitor need and 100% bonus to remote armor repairer range means if you want to run a small fleet of these, they can actually spider tank each other incredibly effectively. You just use remote armor repairers in the high slots and repair each other, giving much better capacitor stability and actually better repairing, that's a word now, repairing overall than standard armor repairers would. Triglavians work really well in fleets. If you can set up a good spider tank, you are nigh on indestructible. Finally, 50% reduced smart bomb capacitor need. I'll be honest, I don't see this as particularly useful on something like a Nergal assault frigate, but it's there, it's a thing, right? We then get bonuses from Precursor Frigate, and with the Nergal being a Tech 2 ship, you do have to have Precursor Frigate trained all the way up to level 5. Therefore, you will have a 25% bonus to light entropic disintegrator damage, which is really nice, and means that this can easily break the tank of a battleship. No questions asked, it will do that. It'll take out Marauders once it's spooled out high enough, and a 4% bonus to all armor resistances. That's 20% at full training there. Means that any damage you do happen to take, because you're a fast and small target, is actually massively reduced thanks to those resistances. Really nice bonuses there. Now, Assault Frigate, this is the skill that obviously you don't have to have trained up. I would strongly recommend training it though, because a 7.5% bonus to Light Entropic Disintegrator maximum range is pretty nice. Light Entropic Disintegrators are fairly short range. Having a longer range on your ammunition is always a good thing. Finally, 20% bonus to Light Entropic Disintegrator maximum damage multiplier bonus is really powerful as well. That's a full 100% bonus at full training, 37.5 there for the maximum range bonus as well, since I forgot to mention. Now, essentially, Entropic Disintegrators are very different to other weapons. They start at a basic damage rate, and every time they cycle, as long as they are still aimed and targeting the same target, that will increase. Ultimately, I can't remember the exact amount it increases, but essentially this will stop normally at 150% of your usual damage. So if you're sitting at 200 DPS, then it would stop at, say, 500 DPS in total. With the bonus here to Light Entropic Disintegrator maximum damage multiplier, that 150% increase is instead a 300% increase, meaning we go all the way from 200 DPS, we will scale 300% of that, an additional 600 for a total of 900 1000 DPS. My maths is completely off there. That is just incredibly good that you can get a frigate to do that amount of damage, and as you'll see in the combat section later, you can actually get the Nergal to do some truly insane damage output. Yes, when I talked about the Occult S, some people pointed out that this doesn't increase the speed at which it spools. Correct, I didn't intend to insinuate that it does increase the speed, it increases the maximum range. If you want to increase how fast it spools up, you need to use stuff that increases the rate of fire. You can use certain implants for that, and there's all kinds of different ways that you could do that as well, with even certain rigs and things like that, just to increase your rate of fire, therefore how quickly you spool up. What this all essentially means is you've got a very small, very fast-moving frigate that is incredibly survivable on the approach, and once it's up and close, tends to be incredibly hard to actually handle. It becomes a bothersome fly that just absolutely shreds, and if it's left there long enough, that DPS can become truly and utterly monstrous. And in a fleet, these things become utterly terrifying. So let's actually talk about the fit that I'm running. This is my PvE Nergal, and this is an incredibly potent vessel that does a lot of different things. We'll talk about that in just a second. Essentially, I'm using this for J-space ratting. It can be used for K-space ratting. I know people who are running up to L3 agent missions in this. L2s are probably the best one to go for, and it will just blitz those at rather incredible speeds. You can do DED site ratting with this. You can go even into Abyssal Dead Spaces. I haven't tested Abyssals with this exact fit, because again, I'm mainly wormhole based, but I do know people who are using very similar fits to this in Abyssal Dead Spaces. With the fit that I'm showcasing here, you're looking at about 240 odd DPS as a starting point. Remember, due to how Entropic disintegrators work, that is the starting point. It will spool up to an additional 300% over the top of that. So if you're looking here at starting at around 290 DPS and increasing that by 300%, this should spool up to somewhere in the region of 1160 DPS. That is utterly monstrous for a frigate. Does take a while to get there, but if it does, oh boy, yeah, if you can like orbit a battleship or something, you have broken its tank and you will just wreck it. Anyway, looking at the actual tank itself for the ship, obviously I've had to turn off the assault damage control here, but even passively we have a brilliant spread of resistances there. 58% on kinetic is a little low, but then we're 72% on electromagnetic, 81% on explosive, and 86% on thermal, with 24.5 HP per second on our armor repair rate. Now, of course, that doesn't sound particularly high. That's not a great armor repair rate, but when you are 36 meters of signature radius, moving at 910 meters per second, you're hard to hit. And any damage that does hit you has to go through those incredibly high resistances. And what's that? They're going to hit you with something big, activate the assault damage control, and now your resistances range from 89% up to 97%. Yeah, it's utterly monstrous. It's also cap stable. So how am I doing this? Well, let's start off with the high slots. I'm using a Veles light entropic disintegrator, and some of you have mentioned, but hang on a second, shouldn't you be using the Disintegrator II, because that gives you the bonuses from the skill, the specialization skill? As far as I'm aware, the specialization skill affects the ammunition, not the turret. So that only actually matters if you're going to be starting not to use just Occult S or Mystic S, but also things like Tetrion, Baryon, or Maison. Now, with the mediums and the larges, yeah, there are times when I do think Tetrion is worth using. On the smalls, you may as well just stick with Occult and Mystic. They do everything that you need them to. You're not going to really struggle running just those two there, so that's kind of what I do. And as far as I'm aware, someone please correct me in the comment section down below if I am wrong, the specialization skill affects the ammo, not the actual turret itself, and the Veles does have better damage scaling, and it does have better tracking as well. Not by much, but it's there. Beyond that though, we then have a free high slot. Because I'm mainly using this in wormholes, I use a Sister's core probe launcher with, of course, core scanner probes fitted just in case I need to scan down and exit or whatever. That said, if you're running this mainly for DED sites, that could be useful as well, but if you're going to be doing, say, burner missions or Abyssal Dead Spaces, you could probably swap that for something like a Nosferatu. Obviously, there are no other hard points, you can't put another weapon in there, so a Nosferatu is probably your best option. I imagine someone out there's probably fitted some kind of drone link augmenter or something into there just to get the drones a little bit better, but I just don't see the point. I'm going to stick with a core probe launcher, a Nosferatu in a worst case, or just not really anything. Obviously, if you are going with a fleet of Nergals or Triglavian vessels, then you can go for remote armor repairers there to spider tank them. That's going to be a brilliant way to go forward. Then we have our different tanking mid-slots. I've gone for a 1 meganewton Afterburner II here to get us nice fast speeds. You could go for a micro warp drive, but the negative hit to the capacitor to me isn't really worth it. Brilliant for PvP, but for PvE, I like being able to just keep that up and running at all times, maintaining that 910 meters per second. I said that's tanking because to me, speed tanking is a big part of the Nergal survivability. The rest of the tank comes in the low slots with a small armor repairer 2 to repair any incidental damage we do happen to take, a Multispectrum Energized Membrane 2, which could be swapped out for a kinetic, I guess, in order to get that kinetic resistance passively up a little bit higher than it actually is. I like the Multispectrum though because there's not that many things doing kinetic damage to me in the sites that I'm running, but you may want to change that based on the enemies you're up against. Finally, for tank, an Assault Damage Control Unit 2, very useful again just for popping that and putting those resistances right the way up. If you know you're going to take a big hit, pop that and don't take the big hit. Then we have rigs for this, small auxiliary nano pump 2, just to, you know, help things go a little bit better on armor repairing if and when you need it. Honestly, this could probably be swapped out, and if I did swap it out, I'd probably go for something like turret rate of fire, maybe? Or you could put, I don't know, you could kind of put anything in there, maybe more capacitor stability, speed increase, really up to you. That's kind of an open slot to do as you see fit. Now, we've talked a little bit about capacitor stability here. Let's segue nicely into that. I'm sitting at 9.3 gigajoules per second of delta, full maximum capacitor of 831. I am running a Republic Fleet small cap battery, an Imperial Navy cap recharger, and in the rigs, a small capacitor control circuit too, just to keep that up. Why? Because again, I'm running this through J-Space ratting systems, which are going to have a lot of neutralization. Now, on its own, this thing will absolutely blitz any of the C1 or C2 sites. It can run C1s and C2s quite comfortably. If you're lucky enough to get a Wolf Rye, however, it can go all the way up to C3 really quite comfortably. And at that point, you can get some truly monstrous damage out of this. Running a Nergal through a C3 Wolf Rye, for example, you are even smaller, you have more armor, and your weapons are doing even more damage. You do so incredibly well with this ship in C3 Wolf Ryes. And if you're lucky enough to find a C13, oh boy, I would argue this is right up there with the Kikimora as the absolute kings of running C13s, because you are so small, so fast, and not as overly expensive as some of the other options for that kind of thing that you could be running. I don't know. But that's the kind of content I'm running with this personally. If there's a C1, C2, or C3 Wolf Rye or C13, I like to break out the Nergal or the Kikimora. They're just brutal for that. Final low slot then is just an Entropic Radiation Sink 2 to get that DPS all the way up. Can you swap things around for this? Yeah, probably. Can you make this cheaper? Can you make it more expensive? All kinds of things you could do. And I'd love to know what kind of fit you guys are running for your own Nergals in the description down below. Speaking of the description, the fit as shown here will be linked in the description, so you can drop it into Pyfer, you can drop it into game and see what kind of skills you need. A lot of people ask me, could you list out all of the skills you need to fly this as effectively as you are? The answer is simply put, no. It's massive. Drop this into your own fitting tool. It'll tell you what skills you're missing and should give you an idea of what you should be training to get this up and running to its fullest potential. So I'm going to showcase the Nergal now in a C2 Wolf Rye perimeter hangar. Remember as well that I do use this fit for running certain abyssal dead spaces, usually only T1s, occasionally T2s. It can just about pull them if I'm feeling particularly feisty, but J-Space ratting is kind of my go-to content for the most part, and I'll run abyssals if there's no good ratting sites available, for example. Now, at this point in time, we had found a C2 Wolf Rye. Remember, a Wolf Rye increases the damage done by small weaponry, reduces a ship's signature radius, increases the ship's armor hit points, and reduces the shield resistances. So for the Nergal, which is obviously a small, fast-moving ship, having that smaller signature radius means you take even less damage. You're getting hit even less frequently. The increase to small weapon damage obviously helps the light entropic disintegrators, and the fact that we've got the additional armor hit points works really nicely on the Nergal as well. Now, there is the downside that obviously shields get a negative hit, but oh well, kinda who cares, you know, at this point, because Triglavian ships really have just terrible shields anyway. So at this point, I've kind of come straight into this site here. You can see that I've landed, we've dropped the mobile tractor unit. I'm now just essentially orbiting each of the ships one by one, using majority Occult, but sometimes swapping to Mystic if the ships are just that little bit too far away for me to be able to apply realistically, you know, apply comfortably with decent range. That said, the Nergal being so small, you can see I'm getting over 1,000 meters per second with the Afterburner active, does mean that you can range into enemy ships quite quickly, and there's not much in the way of, well, really anything in a perimeter hangar, if I'm being completely honest. I was about to say there's not much in the way of webification, but they don't have scrams or particularly that many newts either. In this initial group, there are 2 emergent watchmen that have newts, but they're just frigates and they're not a huge problem to us, especially since we do have that Nosferatu help keeping the tank nice and juiced. Then we've got 3 awakened patrollers. These are the triggers, so I've taken out those frigates first, and you can see we're now going through the awakened patrollers. And the Nergal, because of how those light entropic disintegrators work, because of the Wolf-Rayet system effect, actually does really quite nice damage. A lot of people have asked, with the Wolf-Rayet system effect, does that affect drones? Because it's, you know, small missiles, small weapons, that kind of thing. Does it affect light drones? And the answer there is no. Drones are unaffected by the Wolf-Rayet system effects. So, yeah. There's that. We are using drones here. I've got Hobgoblin IIs at the moment out and running, just because they're the highest damage output, and, well, they seem to apply quite comfortably to almost everything in these sites. But now that we're coming towards the end of Wave 1, let's just fast forward this footage a little bit to Wave 2. With that last awakened patroller down, we spawn in Wave 2, a Sleepless Watchman battleship and 2 awakened escort cruisers. Again, there is nothing really to worry about here, no neutralization, no webs, nothing. As we're approaching the Watchman, it can sometimes be worth just preparing the assault damage control unit in case you start to take a few heavy hits, but you can see we're approaching quite quickly. As I said, we're going over 1,000 meters per second, so it's just under a second for each kilometer that we are approaching here. It's going to take about 20 seconds to get to a nice close range against this particular vessel. I've set the drones off against it. I could start to use Mystic at this point, but by time Mystic starts to spool up, I'm going to be in range to start using Occult, and I know from experience that ultimately it's not worth it. I may as well give it a few extra seconds, start with Occult the second that I hit that, and just start dealing damage that way rather than having to worry about it. So now that we're in range here of that Sleepless Watchman, I am going to orbit this at 5,000 meters, let the Occult do its thing, and start to spool up. You might notice on D-Scan there's a few other people in system here. We've got a Praxis, we've got another Nergal, and a load of core scanners. These are other people in my corporation. Remember, I am in a wormhole corporation. Catskull does have a wormhole campus, so absolutely we have a lot of scouts who are scanning things down. That saves me time. I can just go onto Tripwire and find what I need to when I go ratting. We work as a team. We're usually in voice comms, which any good wormholing corp will be. Just means that if anything does show up on D-Scan and gets a little bit scary, well, we're all there together just to react, respond, and do what we need to. Still well worth D-Scanning repeatedly just to keep your eyes on things. But check out that DPS. We're just about to peak over 700 DPS here against this Sleepless Watchman. That is amazing damage for a frigate. I mean, the Nergal starts at good damage for a frigate generally, then just ramps up ridiculously, and the Wolf-Rayet system effect means we almost hit 800 DPS there against that battleship. That is just absolutely bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. 800 DPS from a frigate. And that's with the drones attacking it as well. I think in a couple of these sites I did actually manage to cross the 1,000 DPS mark in a frigate. I love assault frigates to pieces, I love Triglavian ships to pieces. Basically, give me Triglavian ships for the armor tank and Minmatar ships for everything else. And yeah, I'm going to have fun with it. There's been a running joke in the comment section on this channel that, oh, everything's Benzie's favourite. It's because my favourite's Shift. so much, but the basic rule of thumb is, does it use missiles or cannons or disintegrators? Yes, then I'm going to love it. Does it use shield primarily? Then yes, I'll love it. Is it a frigate, a cruiser, or a destroyer? I'm probably going to enjoy it. Is it a speed tank by default? Then yeah, awesome. If it's Triglavian or Minmatar, especially on Thukka, bonus points. Triglavian, Thukka tribe, however you want to pronounce that, are absolutely my favourite little factions in here, so yeah. I just love flying these ships, and I love getting the opportunity to undock them. So as soon as I see a C2 or a C1, especially with Wolfer IA effects, or a C3 with the Wolfer IA to be fair, I tend to grab a Nergal or a Kikimora, occasionally one of the Minmatar assault frigates or the Svipple or something like that, but there we go. Anyway, Wave 2 is now finished. Wave 3, third and final wave in here. We have a Sleepless Escort battleship and 2 Awakened Escort cruisers. Pretty much the same sort of approach as we had in the last wave. Pick one of the ships, start to go in for an orbit. You are small enough and fast enough, especially with the Wolfer IA special effect, to get right under their guns, even on the approach. You can see I am actually getting up a decent transversal velocity there, which is keeping us nice and hard to hit. The fast moving means that those missiles aren't applying their damage particularly well to me either. We can just... We're not a straight line in there by any stretch. We are sort of coming in at an angle and doing a spiral, which is always a good thing, and absolutely you should. But we're about to start getting into range now of that Sleepless Escort, so we're going to activate there with the light Entropic Disintegrator, start ramming through that with our Occult M ammunition. Occult S, sorry. M. Oh, I'd love to be able to get medium ammunition into a frigate. That'd be insane. But no. So what we're going to do now is just basically, I'm leaving the drones on the Awakened Escort because I want to see how high the DPS can get on the Sleepless Escort. I do also apologise for the little bit of stuttering going on. I was running this on my laptop before it went into the shop. For those of you who don't know, I'm currently having big laptop difficulties, which is why some of my content these days is in different aspect ratios to how it was before. Because my previous laptop, an Asus ROG X13 Flow, love it to pieces. It's been a great workhorse for over a year now. Recently started hitting temperatures of about 88 degrees Celsius on the GPU. Heck, the CPU hit 100 degrees Celsius whilst doing a BIOS test. So yeah, that's in the shop currently getting a lot of work done on it. If you do happen to feel like in a good mood and fancy supporting your captain, I'm in serious need of financial aid to help get that back out of the shop. The bill on that is already terrifying. I'm having to borrow my stepdad's laptop at the moment for playing the game and gathering footage, with a borrowed laptop from my sister just to be able to do the whole Premiere Pro editing side of things. It's not a great situation to be in. Any assistance that you guys could offer would be greatly received. PayPal is in the description down below, as is my Patreon. Obviously, I am recording this at the end of August. If you're watching this at some point in the future, don't stress, I've probably got the laptop sorted. But here we are, 979.3 DPS. Can we get... Oh, not quite. 993 DPS. Nearly crossed the 1000 DPS mark. Wanted to just kind of get that on screen there to showcase, because what an amazing number for a frigate to be able to pull. It does require a Wolfer IA. I'm not running any implants on this character at the moment, so again, if you're going for things like Mimesis, you can get that number up even higher. Anyway, with the last ship being the Awakened Escort, that does bring us to the end of this video. What a great little ship the Nergal is. Again, I use this for J-Space ratting, notably anything C1 or C2, but also, especially if it's a Wolfer IA, C2 or C3, C13s are especially fun with this little ship. Great way to make ISK and fly a ship that I really enjoy flying. If you fly the Nergal or other Triglavian vessels, please do let me know. I'd love to hear how you find them and how you get on with them. Otherwise, folks, we are closing in on FanFest. I will see you out there in Iceland in September 20th to 24th. I'll be in Iceland in Reykjavik. Love to meet some of you guys, maybe share a beer or two, and just chat all things EVE Online. Anyway, all of that said and done then, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.